So communication is at the heart of really why we all come into Amsterdam every September, and everyone wants to communicate with their audiences in bigger and better ways, and we hear all about that all the time, all trying to promote their latest tentpole production they've spent 7 figures on. But you don't need to look very far in either direction from Amsterdam to realise that communication with audiences and in fact citizens can be a little bit more important, and in fact some cases a life and death matter. So we're all too aware of what's happening in Ukraine and this week in Poland. So this is a serious topic, and the Baltic states in general. And earlier this year, Portugal, Spain, they lost all their power. So there are significant reasons why governments and the media need to communicate quickly and accurately with their citizens. So that's why we're here today. And we can find out all about that from the people who are in charge of a great swathe of those areas. And we'll try and find out how we can communicate with the citizens in a timely, accurate manner. And I think it's important to say everyone knows today that sometimes the first thing you'll hear as a citizen will come from social media. And most people know that's not going to be very accurate, but it will signpost them to go and look at their public service channels in the UK, ITV, BBC, etc., similar in Estonia. So, but it's not going to be very long before we find that terrestrial TV, certainly in the UK and further afield, isn't going to be as present as it currently is. So where do people go in the future to get that information? How are the public service broadcasters going to make sure that their government responsibilities can be maintained? And that's the topic of our discussion today. So without further ado, I'm Stewart. I'm one of the members of the IET Media Technical Network, and that's why we're doing these sessions. And I'll let everyone introduce themselves in the order they're sitting. So first of all, Mark.
Thank you. I'm Mark Moran. I'm the BBC's Head of Technology Resilience. Been with the BBC for 32 years. I've been in this role for 2 years. It's a role that I became aware of 28 years ago. And 28 years ago, I thought to myself, oh, I fancy a bit of that. And here I am.
Good afternoon. I'm Kadi Luht-Kallas from Estonian Ministry of Interior, and mainly my response area is public warning systems and the integration to our public warning system, integration associations. And almost 4 years worked with it, and then we started a location-based SMS, and now piloting other new things. I hope that we can discuss those later.
Martti.
Yeah, hi everybody. I am wearing 2 hats actually. I am the CEO of Levira Media Services Limited, a UK service provider for player distribution, streaming, contribution, all sorts of these things. And I'm also the head of innovation and development at Levira Estonia.
Hi, I'm Simon Farnsworth. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at ITV. We are commercial public broadcaster in the UK, so we have the same sort of responsibilities as Mark, and we take that very seriously. I've been there nearly 2 years now, but I've spent a lot of time in the media industry.
Excellent. So that shows you why these people are on the stage. And we are going to be looking to the future, but to understand the future, sometimes you have to understand the past. So television, as we've seen from other areas of IBC, has been around about 100 years, depending on who you ask. The BBC has been around almost as long. So it probably makes sense to start with Mark, just to give us a little bit of history about emergency communication over the last 100 years, how it's worked, how it's developed, and things like that.
Sure. I wasn't there at the start.
Oh.
So you could look back straight back to sort of the World War II era, when the BBC was the voice, and I don't want to say the voice for the government, but it was the voice that shared information with the people of the UK and wider afield. And you come from the sort of the 1940s through the 50s and 60s and 70s, and the method of broadcast, it didn't really change a great deal. the choice of the audience was very limited. You had a small set of radio stations, be that AM, medium wave, long wave, whatever, and a very, very small choice of TV. So in terms of getting to your audience, it was very limited. Us as a broadcaster, we had our own choice. We could do as we choose. Look at that now, and choice is a challenge. You said that, that you get your news or the breaking news from your phone vibrating in your pocket now, and then you go to your choice of, do I trust this, whichever else. And that's the important part now for a public service broadcaster, is to hold on to that very precious gift of trust. And so that's the difference between then and now. But in terms of the history of what we do and why we do it, I like to think about the resilience of how we broadcast. Put aside the horrible events that your state government wants to tell the whole of the country, really horrible things are happening and this is what you need to do. Step back from that a little bit, because the resilience of that infrastructure is not that much different to the resilience of the infrastructure which we do to make sure our TV and radio stations can remain on air now. So be that, we love the weather in the UK, be that we're dealing with a flooding event in Yorkshire, or a coastal flooding on the East Coast, or the storm that hit Northern Ireland back in the spring. All of those events, the audience turns to the public service broadcaster for trusted, well-curated information that is not necessarily seen as the voice piece of the government of the time. I think that bit's important as well, because that's the trust part as well.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And Simon, it's appropriate you're sitting next to Martti, because Levira and ITV launched within a few months of each other in 1955. So what's the part that ITV in the UK has played in the same history period as Martti?
Well, we had our 70th birthday party on Monday night,
Wow.
which was quite fun. And there were lots of sort of reels of going back over time, of moments in time. I think, a bit like Mark, we, as part of our public service broadcaster remit, we have regional news obligations. So we have lots of news gathering capability all over the country. And we take that really, really seriously, because that's that trust. And there are times, and it's written into our license, that says that the government could take over our airways should they choose to. It's never happened yet, because we would question that quite hard, because we want that editorial independence. And that's really, really important for us moving forward. But it's very, very important that we are out there gathering news, delivering that to our audience in a very timely manner, in a very trusted manner. So we take that really seriously, and we've all covered some amazing events, and we've uncovered some huge stories, which has often caused governments to either succeed or fail, and that's really important. And interestingly, last year when we unveiled the story, which wasn't a new story, by the way, about the post office scandal in the UK, it's really important that we are there telling those stories and holding the government to account, but also almost providing a service for the government, and it needs to be protected. And to Mark's point, the audience now is so fragmented across so many different platforms. We kind of need support from the government to give us prominence on those platforms, to ensure that voice is clear, because in an AI cluttered world, which is going to become increasingly cluttered, because you're going to have more content available to more consumers, that trusted voice is absolutely imperative.
Exactly. And Martti, obviously the political history of Estonia is somewhat different to the UK, but you've had the same amount of time being broadcasting. Is there anything you want to say about the history of emergency broadcasting in the UK before we moved on to today?
You mean Estonia?
Estonia, yes.
Yeah, Kadi probably knows that topic a bit better than me, but the emergency sort of broadcasting, at least in the later years, and when I was working for a telco as well, has been very much sort of singular track. There's been a lot of SMS. There's been a bit of our national broadcaster putting out messages here and there. But when the world has changed now, it's all sort of coming together. And the understanding and the experience that it needs to be diversified a lot more. And plugged into many, many different channels all at the same time and make sure that it actually reaches people is crucial. I think that is the major change that has happened. So it used to be, as Mark said, very singular. You turn on your BBC One and you get the news. What if it's not there anymore? What do you do then? You need to get it out. And I think the sort of discussion here as well, as we have two broadcasters, we have a state rep and we have a sort of, we're mainly a network service provider in Estonia coming together. I think that's another important point, is that these parties have historically not known how to interact with each other very well, because we're a technology-oriented company at first, and then a service layer. And the state has an obligation of, getting to the people, and you guys are always on air and putting out that messaging. So if you bring all of these bits together, then we arrive at a pretty interesting point, I think.
Mm. And that segues nicely into you, Kadi. You've heard the broadcasters and the service providers' view and about government independence, etc. So in Estonia, I know we'll talk a bit about the new project that you're doing, but what's the current way that the Estonian government communicates with its citizens in an emergency?
And now? At now we mostly use location-based SMS, and using this we already have realized that as we situating near the Russian border, our environment citizens, almost a quarter of them use another media channels, not Estonian or EU. They are using media abroad, and so it is very important that to get the right attention very, very quickly. That we had feedback from some incidents that we sent an SMS, and after that we had phone calls to our emergency center that thank you, it was the only thing what told me that what happened really, because they don't use Estonian broadcasters, Estonian media. And so it is very important to talk to all the people, because otherwise we just know that it's quite easy to get, from social media, nearly 80% people, it's easy to get. But most vulnerable people are those less 20%, 10% who have disabilities, like they don't know the language or they are maybe have some disabilities. And so it is important to work with all. And of course, as earlier said, that it is changed. That yes, we already used text bars on national broadcast, but we can see that it is very effective during the crisis. Yeah. But it's not a public warning in the pre-crisis period or something just happened. It's not very quickly. But if we're thinking about last days, last months, last years already, we can see that we have to be most effective, and we have only some minutes. So we can't say that the people just looking a national broadcast channel all the time. Mm-hmm. It's not possible. So we have to think how to be there where the people are in real life, in every day, and how to get there. And so we are piloting different projects and thinking how to manage it.
And reflecting back on Mark's point, how do you work with the media, both television, radio, etc., in Estonia that maintains the independence but gets the messages across? How do you manage that relationship?
Yes, we have to validate our sentences before we are going to the text bar, but we have very, very closely working together. And if we are sending location-based SMS, we have national website crisis.ee, then every people can validate the number or the sentence or text message, and also in text message there are the phone number, one number 24/7, it's 1247, and you can validate the message all the time. And it is very important for us that if some fake news somewhere going, then we can just answer, yes, we sent this SMS.
I know that fake news is a real thing for the
Yep.
newsrooms in both public service organisations. Maybe Simon, come back to you, and sort of beyond breaking news, and because you're slightly different to the BBC because your news is subcontracted to ITN. How does ITV and ITN work with the government in times of trouble and emergency messaging, or even other broadcasters?
Well, actually, we're a major shareholder in ITN, so it's a slightly different relationship, but also ITN produces the news for both Channel 4 and Channel 5 in the UK, and then Reuters is a shareholder. So I think, firstly, if you lose that trust with the government, you're dead, right? It's as simple as that. So we take that very, very seriously. So we have relationships with lots of major government departments, and our editorials people are speaking to those people on a regular basis, similar with the UK monarchy, as an example, in terms of the palace. And if you break that trust, you lose all your credibility. So there are regular meetings. Won't sort of indulge who meets who, because that would be utterly inappropriate and probably similar with you, Mark, but there are regular meetings. Our CEOs meet with very, very senior, the very, very top people in government. Like, for example, at our 70th birthday, Rachel Reeves, who is the current Chancellor of the Exchequer, and Lisa Nandy came to the birthday party, so there's a lot of respect. And I think there's also equal respect from government to our people, because the government know that they need our sort of entities to get their message out properly to the people in an unfiltered manner. And likewise, they completely respect the fact that we also have to challenge those messages on behalf of the people. And that's how democracy should behave. So we take that very, very seriously.
And Mark, I mean, you've got all the same infrastructure, but you've also got radio. Does that make a difference to how the BBC communicates?
Does it make a difference? No, is a simple answer. I think it is that trust, keep coming back to that word trust, is essential. And one of your questions, you were saying about the government being able to step in and take control of the airwaves. And it's never happened. I suspect the closest it ever came within the UK was when Boris Johnson made the announcement of lockdown. And it didn't, but there were, and I don't know whether there were conversations about that, but I suspect one of the reasons it didn't happen at the time was there's a huge difference between a BBC presenter who you know and trust, or an ITVN presenter who you know and trust, who you sit and listen to every day and listen to that news from those people, and they telling you something's going on, and after the news, EastEnders is on, or whatever else is on. That has a level of stability for the public, which I know from my conversations with DCMS, that stability is extremely important. But if you've got a Minister of State without any BBC or ITV branding on it, giving a very hard, tough message, that in itself is going to instill fear. And you really want to stay away from that.
Yeah, I think another thing I would add is that ourselves, ITN, the BBC, we form this organisation called the Pool. So we all throw resources, whether that's cameras, delivery satellite trucks, fibre optic cables, and whenever there is something major to say from the government, the Pool always commits to go. So that's kind of the trust. We invest money. They tell us when things are going to happen, because we firmly believe that the country wants to know, and we all collaborate amazingly well. For example, royal weddings that we had recently.
The funeral was a very good example.
Yeah, the funeral, where we all pool together and say, okay, the BBC is going to do the main outside broadcast truck there. We will do whatever needs to be done at Windsor, where they're traveling from, we work together and we collaborate really well together. So it's not a us and them type scenario, but that's really important with the government, that the government realizes that all the major broadcasters are working very closely together and we commit to it.
Excellent. So moving a little bit away from broadcast, it's quite timely because last weekend the UK ran their SMS emergency test, and I think I read up and it's 87 million mobile devices got targeted within a few minutes of each other. And I think this time it seemed to be largely successful. Everyone seemed to say it was successful. So 87 million like that is an audience figure that any broadcaster can only dream about. So do you think that means that the future of emergency messaging is with the cell networks and into the devices in the pocket? Or do you think there's still a place for the public service broadcasters to...
So I'll answer that one with a look what happened in Portugal and Spain. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Their mobile network, from our conversations with both the PSBs in those countries, their mobile network failed very quickly. And that initial message of getting out to people saying there's trouble, brilliant. That mobile phone network is great. But it's not resilient in terms of being able to sustain even a national power outage. And what we do know then is that for that instance, for example, there was no power, so there was no television to turn on. So people couldn't watch the television. So, and they couldn't turn on their broadband because that needed power as well. So it literally came down to an FM transmission. Mm-hmm. And people stood around their cars, or if they bought their little wind-up radio off Amazon, that's what they were using. Mm-hmm. So I think even once we move to an even more IP-delivered set of services, unless that telco network has an investment in its core base stations, which is where's that money coming from, question, there's still that fallback, that desire, I don't know for how much longer, but that ability for the audience to, again, it's trusted. I know if I turn that radio on, there is going to be a message on that radio.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing about the Portugal one is that our chief executive was on holiday in Portugal at the time. We had quite an interesting experience because we had a certain LEO satellite provider who was trying to court us for business and gave us some free terminals. We said to her, why, go try it in Portugal. So she was still connecting with everyone back home over LEO satellites. But like you said, I actually think the transmitter network transmitting live television pictures would still work. Yep. In the UK, we know most of those base stations that have UPSs and generator backup power. But if you don't have power in your home, no one can get it. So I think it's a really nuanced answer, and it's a really complicated answer that I think you're going to have to look at lots of mediums for communicating those messages in the future, even on maybe those obligations go to YouTube, or they go to TikTok, or they go to these other things that, because the audience is so fragmented, they're not looking at any one thing at any one time.
Yeah, and that ties nicely into the conversation we had, because I think you identified all those problems in Estonia, and your messaging is probably likely to be more important than ours for the time being. So before we hear from Martti about the technology of your new solution, can you just talk us through the conversations that went on at government level and the decisions that you had to go through before commissioning the new way of communicating?
Yes, from our side background, as you mentioned, the Portugal and Germany cases, we also have realized that during the winter time, a long period, winter storms, snowstorms, then the same situation is happening, that mobile network is collapsing. And if we think that we have a location-based SMS already, it's yes. At now we are working with cell broadcast also because our possibilities take times at least 5 years, I'm afraid. But the second channel should be on another network. And why it is important also is that in Estonian case, we have neighboring countries, as earlier said, then being near the border, you can't be sure that if a roaming is on your phone, it's that you are maybe connected with another network. And so you don't get information or early warning from our side. Another aspect is the areas on the sea. And then when mobile network also doesn't work. So there are different reasons why we are looking for the possibilities. Also the Galileo early warning system possibilities, and but now piloting this 5G broadcast. Because another aspect what is maybe not so hard as we mentioned earlier, but if you are driving by car, you are not allowed to use mobile phone. Please don't do it. But you need public warning in this case also. From Valencia, my colleague said that, oh, I was there, yes, everything beeped, but we just drive and we don't know what it is. But if it's somewhere on the, maybe from the outdoor radio stations, it's helped also during you are in the drivers.
So how would you summarize the new 5G for broadcast system that you talked about? How is it going to work? Are you going to be in control of it?
The messages, yes, of course. We want to be authorized authority who send the messages, and it is very important that all of our partners are very good relationships, and we are really afraid the possibilities that someone else, especially from abroad, can do it. It's a possible threat, and we have to manage it. But also it is very important to us that this possibility to send public warning have to be also usable on phones and the television, because at the homes also we are going to home, put your phone somewhere else and go to sleep. Everybody say that for my mindfulness it's very important to be away from the phone, especially, or maybe silent mode, sleeping mode during the nighttime. So other possibilities is also important, although everybody use mobile phones.
So Martti, maybe you can give us a bit of a deep dive, because obviously Levira has developed the technology that's supporting this idea. So how does it actually work? How does 5G for broadcast differ from cell broadcast in the UK? What's the difference and how does it work?
Yeah, well, it is together with some partners, of course. But yeah, we're using the 5G broadcast protocol. And there's a sub-protocol, which is emergency alerting. So there's still standards being confirmed and going around, and the OEM providers, the phone manufacturers, still need to agree a few bits here and there. But it's working on the N71 band, and it's using similar logic to the cell broadcast. It's just doing that over the 5G broadcast protocols. So it's sending in your phone a message that will pop up on the screen, and the phone will start shouting at you. It doesn't matter in what mode it is, as long as it has a bit of battery life still left. But the whole premise of all of this is, as you talked previously, is that the broadcast network inherently is built differently than the telco network, having worked for a telco for a long time. That is the main point of all of this thing, actually. So you need to be present on FM, you need to be present at DAB+ if your country has rolled it out, etc. Because the redundancy level and the multiple connectivity that you have on a broadcast network is just totally different. And it's not if we have a bandwidth, we will provide you a bit sort of telco approach, which is fine on everyday cases. But yeah, in snowstorms, in emergency situations, it's just not going to cut it. Well, we've seen cells going down in 15 minutes. And if you need to be up for a week, even 2 days, how are you going to do that? There's just no funds to rebuild the telco network. It's just too huge. It just won't happen. So yeah, 5G is going to come in the future. We love tech. We're invested in that, and we got the ministry to come along with this, which is quite excellent. We've run the first tests. It's very promising. We call it the pocket siren. Yeah, it works quite well. And then yeah, there's a bit of arm twisting we need to still do with Qualcomm and with some of the OEMs, but yeah, it's doable. These talks are already ongoing.
So once it's rolled out in Estonia, are there any barriers other than Qualcomm that you mentioned? Are there any other barriers to potentially rolling it out to all the Baltic states and then perhaps wider in Europe?
No. If we were to do it, then theoretically we could do it, but practically, yeah. There's similar companies in all of the countries as Levira. Network owners, broadcast network service providers. So yeah, they can easily roll it out. Not a problem at all.
Okay, that sounds good. So bringing it back to the UK, and you mentioned earlier about the audience being fragmented, and you've got people live streaming ITVX, iPlayer, and all the other ones. And we're now getting, you mentioned LEO, we're getting satellite-enabled smartphones. Where do you think that's going to end up? Because I know there's a lot of debate about when terrestrial broadcast will reduce in the UK, and there's Ofcom things, and Tim Davies talking about it. Everyone seems to be talking about it. But at some point it will end or significantly reduce. What's that future going to look like for the audience for getting that emergency messaging?
I think you were mentioning about serving parts of the audience that are not necessarily in places that are digitally rich, or they themselves can afford to go and buy new kit, or they may just not be interested in buying new kit. And so from the license fee point of view, we use the postage stamp idea that it costs the same in Stornoway as it does in Merthyr, as it does in London. It doesn't matter where you are, you get that service. And so that's a really, really important promise within the license fee. So do I think a form of terrestrial broadcasting for TV and radio will be here for the next 15, 20 years? I cannot see how it can't be. And there's plenty of technology that could answer and fill those pieces. But the last time that type of major investment was done within the UK, British Telecom was called the Post Office. And therefore it was the government that made that investment. British Telecom, as it now stands, and all the other telcos since with deregulation, where's the incentive for them to do that? To get that absolute coverage that an FM transmitter or a DTT transmitter does. So it's not a technological problem, and it's not a desire from the audience problem. It is who is going to pay for it.
Yeah, and you made that point earlier.
Yeah, I think it's a super complex problem, right? And I'll put it in real terms. When we had the semi-final to the World Cup last year, and we had a total audience of, I think it was about 23 million, of which 4.5 were streaming. And as part of that, we were chewing about 60% of the UK's internet capacity at that time. Now, you look at the audience behaviours over time and do the extrapolation of the maths, quickly you're going to come to a point where that doesn't work. You're going to flood the internet. And you've got a telecoms company like BT who are being forced to throw billions of pounds of capex in to upgrade that infrastructure, but you get all these over-the-top providers using that for free as part of the net neutrality law. So something needs to change, otherwise something's going to break. It simply won't work. So technologies like unicast, which is pretty much what terrestrial broadcasting has been doing, will need to come into play. And also, historically, you'd have been forcing your state-owned telcos to put fibre optic into every single home in the country. Now, in Estonia as well, you're quite a distributed population. In the UK, we've got people up on the northern islands of Scotland, of the Isles of Scilly down in the southwest. Are the telcos going to dig fibre optics and all? No, they're not. So it's going to need to be a combination of technologies that knit together, whether it's LEO satellites, whether it's 5G broadcast, whether it's repositioning some of the terrestrial airwaves that have been used for traditional terrestrial broadcast. It needs to be solved, because on that very same night of that semi-final, we heard at 12 o'clock that day that Fortnite were going to release their latest version, of which if they're downloading that and you're streaming,
The maths don't work.
the pipes don't work.
Yeah.
It's a physics problem, so there needs to be a different way. And I think ultimately, if public service broadcasting is going to transmit over IP networks, net neutrality in a sense will need to be revisited, because you will need to prioritize some bandwidth to be able to do that, because otherwise it doesn't work.
Does that need then to be two separate networks? Leave the one we've got now, how it is, and then build a completely new one? Or
There are lots of conversations going on with governments, I'm sure, in Estonia and the same in the UK, but the current regulatory model and the way that the internet works will have to change for that to happen. Either you cordon off a piece of network to do that and have two separate networks, or cordon off a piece, have one network but cordon off, or two separate networks. Because also the notion of building bigger trunk routes up and down the country is not a simple thing. Like, you've got to shut down roads, you've got to shut down railways, you need diggers going in and pulling new pipes. That's a huge, huge project in itself, which takes a long period of time. And if you look in the UK, we've seen all the marketing like 5G is going to be universal over the time. Now, it's not that simple, because some of the cells only cover 400 meters, 800 meters, and actually physically getting people to go up, put those masts up, when weather's bad and things like that, it's not simple, and we're not there yet. That's going to require a long period of time too.
The other thing to remind ourselves about the current infrastructure, the current DTT and FM infrastructure in the UK, wasn't built in 2 years. It was built over decades of proper wireless engineering, engineers going out, surveying, and taking decades to figure out that's a wrong shaped valley, you're going to need a repeater, and that took decades. And that same process is what needs to go through to get somewhere near that the reliability and resilience which we currently have.
And there was an article in this month's TVB Europe that they talking about the same subject, and their conclusion was that perhaps public service broadcasters, they were talking UK, but it would go wider than that, need to become classed as critical national infrastructure. Yeah.
Well, I think the BBC already is.
Yes, so
BBC is, but
does that need to widen to everyone who's communicating?
We would wholeheartedly agree with that. But yeah, it does. It's so important for society at large that you have healthy public service broadcasting that is distributed broadly.
But you look at the CNI, critical national infrastructure. In the UK, we recently started talking about data centres being part of the CNI. From my conversations with those data centres, they don't really understand what that means yet. And they've got to figure that out. And it's all very well saying that great big box that has an awful lot of computing power in it is CNI, but the fibre infrastructure that those plug into, that's not part of CNI. So it's if you want to have that resilient, trusted network, it's about a mindset change and an investment change.
And probably controversial question, who is going to pay for it? You mentioned it earlier on. Who is going to pay for this?
I think that is the...
There's a lot of looking at feet at this point.
Yeah.
That's the multi-billion-dollar question.
Yeah.
Is that you can't deregulate your telecoms infrastructure, and that telecoms infrastructure then has shareholders for them to just go, no, you've got to do that. Because they go, well, hold on. If I pump in £15 billion, I'm going to want to see a return on my capital for that. That doesn't work for something like this. So I think ultimately governments are going to have to try and find a way, and it's probably going to be a conglomeration of lots of partners working together, like, who knows, AWS, Google Cloud, these guys are all working together with Starlink, with Web One World or whatever, the OneWeb, is it? The Eutelsat one? Or, OneWeb. Yep. As well as the telco providers, it's going to need a combined effort. And because also, I think what's important in there is that for our countries to be long-term successful, the countries need digital literacy. You can't get that unless you've got access to the networks, right? 2 and 2 doesn't equal 5.
Is it though necessary to build this sort of like a state network? Because as you mentioned just now, it's been over decades we built these networks, and they are resilient. Our network also is the sort of national critical infrastructure part, etc., etc. It's already there. And what 5G, and why we're looking into this, could provide for us is if we have broadcasters putting their content on it as well, because it's a broadcast network, 5G broadcast. You can get your content here on the phone, etc. You're going to cater to that experience that the viewers want, to a degree. Granted, there's going to be the apps and etc. and your Netflixes and things which will not work if the network's down. But if you tie the 5G emergency alerting and the 5G broadcast together, and you bring your content on there, like BBC or the national broadcasters and ITV channels, etc., that is an interesting offering to the market as well. And it's not necessarily the idea of prolonging this broadcast idea, but it's giving it life, giving it new content. Because it's not an agony, it's a bloody good service. And it's a really good network. I think we should sort of sustain that.
Prior to this session, I was in a technical paper session with broadcasters from Brazil. And that pretty much is what they have done with is it Mondo? Yeah. And they're creating an infrastructure that's broadcasting to 200 million people, which is not a small little population. And you can see from what they're thinking, they're calling it DTV3, and that is 5G broadcasting. And all the nice to haves that you were talking about, that would drop out. It could be something there.
I think if you look back over history, humans will find a way, right? We had at times starving population, sadly, in history, and the farming revolution came through. Engineers found ways to make tractors and combines, and suddenly food production goes up. Industrial revolutions, technologists will find a way to solve these problems. We need to give them the space to be able to do that.
And I think that's an excellent sentence to end this panel session on, because that sums everything up, I think. So I'd just like to say thank you for all of you, sort of Mark, Kadi, Martti and Simon, for coming along, and for everyone else as well.
Thank you.